we match the background now.
Oh, we do. Hi, my name is Victoria Smart. I'm a realtor with Keller Williams Spokane.
And hi, my name is JenniferGustafson. I'm a mortgage loan officer with Guardian Mortgage.
And today we want to talk a little bit about the NAR Settlement, the National Association of Realtors, and everything that's been going on with that recently, and more specifically, how it affects two specific buyer pools more than any others.
NAR. NAR is the National Association of Realtors.
Correct.
And on March 15th, 2024, there was a huge settlement.
Correct.
And so you're hearing so much information on social media about this settlement,
right,
and how it affects the buyer, the seller, and you kind of broke it down as far as there are a couple different pools of buyers that are going to be affected the most.
Right. Specifically first-time home buyers and VA buyers. They're going to be affected the most by this change in the industry, because with this change, it now will be more the responsibility of the buyer to provide that compensation to their broker instead of the seller compensating the buyer broker.
So basically, in a nutshell, how we've always done business, or how business has always been done, is you have two agents for the transaction. So you have a listing agent or a seller's agent that represents the person who's selling the property. And then you have a buyer's agent who is representing the buyer purchasing the property. And both agents get paid, right?
Right.
So we're gonna have both the listing agent or seller's agent and the buyer's agent are both going to get paid once that transaction has closed. So they don't get paid before, they don't get paid during, they only get paid once it has completely closed. And normally what would happen is the seller who is selling that property, say they're selling the property for $300,000 and they owe $200,000 on the property, simple math here, they in theory should net $100,000 from the sale of their home. Home's selling for $300,000, they owe $200,000, the seller, the transaction's complete, and you would think the seller would then net the $100,000, and out of that, the seller normally would pay the listing agent's commission and also pay the buyer's agent commission.
Right.
Once a transaction has closed out of their net proceeds. And this lawsuit that happened on March 15th, 2024, or that's rather settled on March 15th, 2024, is stating that the seller no longer has to pay the buyer's commission. But that's always been the case.
That has always been the case. It just was sort of standard practice for them to pay it because the listing broker procured a certain percentage amount that they would split with the buyer's agent.
Typically, a listing agent or seller's agent would get, for an example, 6%.
Right.
And what they would do is they would say, I'm going to keep 3%. I'm going to give the buyer's agent 3%. How the lawsuit came about was because sellers felt, or there was a group of sellers or that felt that they were never disclosed this information. They were unaware that they were paying the buyer's agent commission.
Right.
And the seller is saying, I no longer want to pay the buyer's agent commission. I just want to pay my listing agent or my seller's agent. And if that is the case, if the seller does not pay the buyer's agent commission, it's going to affect who?
Mostly first-time home buyers and VA buyers. First-time home buyers because the majority of times they don't have the funds to pay a buyer broker. Most of the time, the first-time home buyers I work with don't have funds for their closing costs. So we negotiate for their closing costs to be covered. So if they don't have funds for their closing costs, they definitely don't have funds to pay another fee on top of that for their buyer broker.
And I mean, just to be clear, we're dealing with percentages or just mathematically to break down a percentage, for example, if you're selling a $300,000 house, 1%, $3,000. So if your buyer's agent is going to get 3% of that transaction, they would be getting $9,000.
Right.
So if the seller is not going to be covering this fee of $9,000, then it would be passed on to the borrower to pay, or the buyer to pay. In my situation, they're always the borrower, but for you, they're the buyer. So it would be passed down to the buyer to pay, and that's going to be a challenge because most people buying a home, if they're a first-time home buyer, they've maybe saved over the last few years and got enough money together to cover their down payment or closing costs, and they're just kind of scraping. So to come up with an additional $9,000 would be a challenge.
Right.
And so those are going to be the people that are going to be most affected, because if they are unable to pay that buyer's agent commission, then they're going to be missing out on having representation.
Right.
They have to do it on their own.
And that is how buyer brokers came about in the first place, was potential home buyers were going directly to list agents to purchase a home, and the listing agent's duties were to the seller, not those buyers. And so that's how the buyer broker was formed, was because home buyers need representation. They need someone there to advocate for them and to relay information. That's why all of these components go through the listing agent and the buyer's agent. The seller and the buyer rarely, if ever, will speak or even meet during the transaction.
It's real scary to think of having to go through the process without having an agent. I mean, most first-time home buyers I talk to, people that are very successful in their careers, understand their business inside and out. When they come to me and they're purchasing their first home, they're often clueless. They don't know where to start. Like, where do I start? Do I connect with a real estate agent? Do I connect with a lender? How do I go about this whole process? If you talk to a first-time home buyer, they're not going to know the steps once they go into contract. Well, who do I call? What do I do? That's why having a mortgage lender to hold your hand through the process from contract to close on the lending side is so important. And you're also going to need somebody to kind of hold your hand through contract to close on the real estate side as well. As a first-time home buyer, would you know when to order the home inspection? Would you know how to pick a home inspector? Once a home inspection is done, it could be several pages long. As a first-time home buyer, would you even know where to start? What are your major concerns? If you're handed an inspection that lists, I don't know, how many items are commonly listed on
an inspection report?
100.
So picture it, you're a first-time home buyer, you have an inspection done on the property. Now you get a report that has 100 different items listed on it, right? And any home is going to have, even the best of homes is going to have 100 different items listed on it. Even a new construction home is going to have 100 different items listed on it. Every home does. And they're minor. Some could be as simple as a cover on an outlet, the little plastic cover that you get from Home Depot for $5 that you screw in with 2 screws.
Oh, that's an expensive outlet cover.
What are they, like $2?
69 cents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're so cheap.
So a 69-cent outlet cover is going to be listed on that home inspection. So as somebody who has never purchased a home, you're supposed to weed through 100 different things and pick out the things that are important to you. Now, are those things important, or do those things need to be addressed? Because some things are safety, some things are going to be required to be completed for your loan.
For the appraisal, right?
Let's touch on a topic that comes up all the time on homes. If you have a home that was built after 1978, or actually before 1978, and the paint is peeling, how much of a problem can that cause?
It's a major problem for an FHA loan, which is what a lot of first-time homebuyers use, because of the potential of lead-based paint. That paint that's chipping could be, you know, the 20th coat of paint that's on there, and there's no lead-based paint in it, but because that home was built prior to 1978, we have to take precautions against that. So all chipping, peeling paint has to be scraped and repainted in order for that loan to go through. You quite literally could not close on that house until that's done.
Correct. So if you're going to a house that looks perfect, say you didn't have an agent, right? You go to a house, it looks perfect, there's some peeling paint, you think to yourself, oh, no big deal, I'll fix the paint later. Could be an issue. You could pay for an inspection, you could pay for an appraisal, you could take all of the time, you can give your notice at your apartment complex, you could have your movers scheduled, everything, and then last minute there's going to be an issue because it's got peeling paint. Now, if you had an agent, they would have known that ahead of time.
Right.
So that's just kind of one example. Safety issues, that's another example. So when you get an inspection, you're going through that inspection and you have an agent, that agent's going to help you out, right?
Right, yeah. We are looking specifically for anything that is a safety concern or an appraisal issue, because we're not going to get all 100 or however many dents and dings there are in that house. We're not going to get all of those things fixed. We're looking for things that are larger issues that need to be addressed prior to the loan closing. And you may, as the home buyer, have to take on some of those smaller concerns once you actually move into the property.
Yeah. So that's just kind of one of the things, or one of the benefits of having a buyer's agent. So the huge misconception of the NAR Settlement, so the National Association of Realtor NAR Settlement, is that the seller is no longer going to be paying for the buyer's commission.
Right.
And that's not true.
That's not true. We still see homes on the market all the time that are offering buyer broker compensation. So it's important as a first-time home buyer that you have that conversation with your realtor of what their fee is, how you are anticipating them to get paid. Because if you need the seller to cover that cost, they need to know that up front, so that way they can find you homes where the seller is offering compensation or where they can negotiate to get their compensation included in the purchase price, right?
One of the things I want to touch on is VA. So I do a lot of VA financing. I've specialized in VA financing for a number of years in my career. I love VA financing. I actually have a VA loan on my home, so I like them a lot.
So VA, in their guidelines, state that the veteran or active duty member is not allowed to pay buyer's agent compensation at all. At all. So if the seller refuses to pay the buyer's agent compensation and the buyer wants to pay it using a VA loan, they're not allowed at all.
Right.
So what would happen if you were, let's just do a little example.
Okay.
So you're a VA buyer, you're out looking for your first home, and you're working with a buyer's agent, and you find a home that the seller is not paying buyer's agent commission. And you want to put an offer on that home. What would happen?
Well, there's a couple things you can do there. There is a form that we can use as a buyer broker that says the seller isn't offering compensation, but we're requesting that they compensate us. We can include that in your offer, and the seller can choose to accept that, or they can not accept that. If the seller is outright refusing to pay buyer broker compensation and you otherwise can't pay it, that may be a house that isn't going to work for you in the long run. You could potentially try to increase the purchase price and ask for that money back to pay your buyer broker, as long as the home is worth that additional amount. But it's a negotiation in that. And so we wouldn't want you to get your heart set on this home and know that it may not work out for you.
Right. And for first-time homebuyers, same thing. So if you're doing an FHA loan, same type of thing, but FHA is slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
So with FHA, if the seller doesn't want to pay the buyer's agent compensation, then the buyer can pay it.
The buyer can pay it. However, like we talked about with most first-time home buyers, they're not going to have the funds to do that, which is why VA buyers and first-time home buyers are really the pools of buyers affected most by this decoupling of the compensation.
Yeah, they are. They're truly the two that are going to be affected the most. Seasoned buyer that's bought several properties before, somebody that has a large down payment, doing conventional financing, they may just pay the fee themselves out of their own checking, savings, asset account. But somebody who is very limited funds, first-time home buyer, or using their military benefit, the benefit they earned, they're going to be the ones that are going to suffer the most.
Right. The good news is that we're still seeing buyer broker compensation being offered today. However, that may or may not persist as the norm.
I think basically it just boils down to when you purchase a home, everything is negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can negotiate. If you see a home listed for $300 and you want to offer $280, offer it.
Right.
You know, if you see something that doesn't have a buyer's compensation or buyer's agent compensation, offer it.
Ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and check out our other videos for more information on the home buying process.
Yeah, thank you.